Hey, everybody. Welcome to Fridays with Steve. Thanks for joining us, whether it's live or after the fact. We really appreciate all the folks following the show and engaging with us, both here on LinkedIn and YouTube, as well as reaching out to us as a company. So just a quick thanks to everybody. I know everybody's timeline, news feed, Instagram stories have all been just absolutely, swamped by Copilot. The news last week of true general availability, the fact that some of the minimum caps were removed, partners as well as customers, smaller than enterprise, having the ability to really embrace Copilot, add it to your licensing, add it to your solution, and really start the journey. And so we thought it was great timing to reach out both here and through other vehicles that we use here at Apex, and see if we can add to the conversation and really help folks, including ourselves, start to navigate this world, because there's a lot to learn. There's some things that look pretty familiar, but then there's some differences in the way the solution works and the rate of adoption and things like that that really make it something genuinely new. And so just a quick word about us. Very proud to work for Apex. Our ability to drive customer satisfaction over the 24 plus years we've been in business. Gold and silver partners are gone. If you see that nomenclature, it's supposed to be gone everywhere. And we've moved to the Cloud Partner Program, where we're a specialist in modern work, advanced specializations across modern work, and really well positioned to help our customers navigate this particular world. And so today, we're going to talk about Copilot. I took some content from different places to try and convey the basics along several different sort of trains of thought. We'll talk a little bit about the AI moment. I think there's a couple of things that are pretty stark to think about when you think about this technology, and just a book I read classified it as hyper novelty. Things are always changing, but we've really entered into an era of what they refer to as hyper novelty, and things changing very, very fast. We'll talk about Copilot. We'll talk a little bit about the components, the pricing, what's in and out. But I think most importantly, we'll talk a little bit about how to use it. I assembled a few examples in the different products where you can see it in action, because one of the things we've already discovered just in the last couple of weeks is that seeing it in action, talking to someone, understanding how they're using it is absolutely critical. I'm sure there's a Copilot book. If not, there's a Copilot book in the works. But to me, it's akin to reading a book about, Google or Yahoo or Ask Jeeves search, in the 90s and 2000s. Most of what we did was trial and error, learning from our peers, experimenting. And so Copilot kind of feels that same way. And so I'm going to use some examples and point to a couple of resources that I think can be pretty useful in this space as we all want to come up to speed. So I found this graph just absolutely illuminating when it comes to the rate of adoption and the rate of change. And so this is sort of time to reach 100 million users, whether it's mobile phones. So if you think of the long trajectory of mobile phones, my dad worked in a job where he was actually an early mobile phone adopter, and it was quite literally one of those Motorola bricks. And it was really hilarious to play with. It was a real attention grabber, but it took a long time for that technology to move beyond sort of a core adoption footprint. The internet, Facebook accelerating it. But then if we use ChatGPT as sort of a stand-in or sort of an allegory for this moment with large language models and conversational AI, it took 3 months. right? So we've gone from 16 years to 3 months. Order of magnitude kinds of changes in the rate of adoption. And so Microsoft, looked at this and looked at what people were actually already realizing with Copilot. And so, as many of you know, some of you like us may have tried to get into some of the early programs, the early adopter or the jumpstart programs, but they ran studies on the kind of savings and the kind of ROI that people were seeing, based on the price point of adding Copilot to your licensing versus the amount of time saved on an individual level. And you can see how just saving 2-3 hours a month has amazing ROI. And one of the most stark pieces of the study is that some of the top users of Copilot, even in that early adoption timeframe, we're saving 10 hours a month. And so even I can do that math and say, we're getting payoff, for a year's worth of Copilot in a month. And then the next 11 months are all, added productivity and added capability to the business. And so, the early studies just really point to the productivity gains that people are seeing when introducing Copilot into their environment. And so, like a lot of other things, a tool is a tool. And so I put together some things that I really encourage you to think about, to work with a partner like Apex as you think about your rollout and adoption and sort of assimilation. Kind of an interesting term in this world of AGI. But how is it going to matter to the business? Because, the goal isn't to bring a shiny new object into the environment. The goal is to, make your people more productive, more satisfied in their roles, being given more time to spend on mission critical or business value add kinds of activities versus day-to-day keep the lights on kinds of things. So what are your goals? What is the low-hanging fruit? Me and some of my peers have a long history of doing things like CIEs, like customer immersion experiences, where we talk about Teams adoption or we talk about adoption of M365 and we say, what's the low-hanging fruit? What's the status report? What's the weekly meeting that we can do in a different way using these tools to increase productivity? And so look for those low-hanging fruit pain points in the organization. What are the current capabilities? Are you starting from scratch? Are there already pockets of people using ChatGPT? I know some of the younger members of my team are very fluent with, I'm going to send a customer email. I wrote a first draft. Let's run it through ChatGPT for edits, or let's take and use some AI to better position my message. Copilot allows you to do that inside the walls of the business and securely. And so some folks may already be doing it. What's your data strategy? There's huge interaction with the Microsoft Graph. You'll see a quick video on data protection and how that can be important. And then it becomes the infrastructure and resources to support it, right? Just like any other solution, my favorite organizations to talk to were always the ones where IT, flipped the switch and several years ago now and turned Teams on for 1,000 people and, profit, right? We're waiting for the magic to happen versus saying, hey, how are we going to do training? How are we going to do this rollout? How are we going to do, ongoing support and enrichment? And the same is true here in this world of AI. And so Copilot is embedded across all the M365 apps. I've got some great examples of some of the different ways you'll see it manifest in the apps. So one of the key elements of this is the semantic index. And so the reason that Copilot is powerful for your business is it's designed to draw against yours and your specific semantic language, right? So I looked up semantic, right? It's an adjective and its first meaning is of or relating to meaning, especially meaning in language. And so think about it this way. Microsoft likes to talk about, one of their examples is always Project Falcon, right? Well, so think about a large language, a large learning model. And what it would do with the word falcon? Well, it would swamp the boat by saying, well, it's a bird, right? And you get all kinds of bird results back or bird influenced answers versus Project Falcon, if it's a project within your business, creates knowledge within the semantic index so that when Copilot fields a question about Falcon, it is sort of coded for your business, right? Language really, really matters. And I know even within our own organization already, we're seeing how that works. We're seeing how, questions that without the apex context might seem, well, they might seem weird, or they might bring back some really wild results. But for us, it makes sense because it's a term we use, or a customer we have, or an event we did. And rather than getting generic results, we get results and we get insight that is colored by our semantic index, built from your data. It's yours. It is isolated and protected to your tenant and your sort of footprint in the world. And Microsoft isn't sharing those semantic indexes with anyone else. It actually informs the search kind of on the way out. If you'd like a follow-up on sort of I've got a build slide or a number of build slides that talk about sort of the architectural flow of a Copilot query, let me know and I'd be happy to share them with you, because you can see how it's, hey, let's go reference the semantic index, understand what this person's really asking, and then use that to inform the answer. And then, the Microsoft Graph is that gateway to your data and the data intelligence within your organization. How are things related to each other? And so between the semantic index and the Graph API, Copilot asks its questions with a ton of context and a ton of insight into your specific world. And so it ensures that those questions that you ask are rooted in what you do, right? If I want to ask a question about a project or a customer, between the semantic index and the graph, you get it grounded in your business, right? So the index sits on top of the graph to really interpret those queries, to really sort of convert the language from something that in an LLM publicly might seem very generic into something that is just loaded with context within your own environment, right? To the point where, we're a medium-sized organization. Quick check, there are no other Steves within the organization. You could probably get away with some of the queries saying, hey, is Steve working on any projects that I might be interested in? Or show me Steve's calendar next week so I can find 30 minutes to talk about Project Falcon, right? That semantic index and the Graph API provide all of that context to Copilot to make sure it's grounded in your business. And so they made the purchasing relatively straightforward, if not slightly cumbersome. It's $30 per user per month. But there's a nuance here in our CSP world. So the customers we work with around licensing is that it has to be bought annually and paid for annually. It's kind of an interesting nuance. I wonder, and this is just me speculating, if Microsoft didn't have concerns about churn. That with a lot of people, doing this for the first time and wanting to kick the tires, if they weren't going to have a lot of on for a month, off for a month, on for a month, this user, that user, on, off, if they weren't going to have a lot of that. And because of that, at least initially, it looks a little bit different than your NCE options, but it is something that you can add on to a set of licensing, E3, E5, both M and O, Business Premium, a number of license sets. We can help you navigate all those in an annual way, but not for the whole tenant, right? Not for everybody. And so I know internally, we started off with a few licenses and are growing from there, giving us the ability to, really pilot it before we blow it out sort of wildly. And so there's also a lot of crossover naming that's in the world. And so I thought this slide is a good resource to be able to see that there is a distinction between Copilot Pro, which is really for individuals, and Copilot for Microsoft 365, which is really that organizational flavor, right? You can see that Pro and M365 versions both have the apps, but it's really the M365 version that brings in Teams, it brings in the Graph API and data protection. I see all of our customers, working on that M365 side. As an individual user, as someone with a subscription to Office 365, sort of publicly, it just that there's this ability to go ahead and have access to Copilot with some added features when it comes to that public availability. For the most part, I'm talking about the right side of this graph, which is everything that's out there for organizations. And then within organizations, we've also got a bunch of stuff named Copilot, right? We've got Copilot for M365, which is really what we're talking about today, which is that add-on for your O or your M subscriptions or business premium, and really adding that capability to your users. If you're using sales or service elements and want to really enhance those roles, you can go with a more expensive SKU that adds those role specific capabilities. Copilot for sales, asking questions of CRM and being present within CRM tools or service tools. If you're a service-based organization, bringing in all the M365 pieces, but then also bringing in the role-specific things or the platform-specific things for some of your users. And so what I've assembled here is a few walkthroughs of just maybe one experience or one key kind of use case within some of the different platforms. And so I've got some videos that hopefully kindle your ideas about how to use the tech. Like I said, I never read a book about how to do good Google searches. It was trial and error. It was watching other people. It was learning by experiment. And I think Copilot's going to be a lot the same. So let me share some of those stories with you now.
Imagine you have an appointment that conflicts with your weekly business review. What if you could do both? With Copilot, you can opt to follow a meeting. After the meeting ends, Copilot will summarize what you missed. You'll get a notification in Teams when the recap is ready. This recap will highlight content that was shared, summarize notes, and any action items for you or others whose names were mentioned. You see that one of your customers was discussed, and you want to learn more. You can ask Copilot clarifying questions, and it provides a detailed response. It can tell you why a certain decision was made, and gives you helpful context. You can even ask Copilot what other solutions were considered, and it provides citations from the transcript so you can see where Copilot drew these conclusions. It's a huge time saver. So that was pretty cool. But the real magic of Copilot happens during a live meeting. Let's say you're in a meeting with your team. You can ask Copilot to summarize the meeting so far. You can see how it summarizes who said what points were made, and it's really capturing the spirit of the discussion. And as the meeting progresses, you can check in on where people stand. You can even ask Copilot what questions are unresolved. It's just amazing to see this happen in real time during a meeting.
So one of the interesting distinctions, and I tracked down this slide, is, we've got Teams Premium and we've got Copilot in Teams. And there's some distinctions here that, again, we're learning internally as we navigate this, as we roll out Copilot to everyone in the organization, that recap and elements of the recap available to your Teams Premium folks, it's a built-in and sort of automated outcome. It's standardized. You get the chapters, you get the audio video. It's available after the meeting, versus Copilot, where you saw in the video interacting with Copilot during the meeting, right? It's based on your prompts and you can take it in any direction you want. And it's available both during and after the meeting. Total transparency, that was a bit of a learning journey for us, right? I worked with our CTO, Sean Flahy, to really kind of explore what do you see? Well, what do you see, right? Based off of sort of the different components we had deployed to each of us, and really walked through this scenario. I think it's going to be a little bit confusing for a while, and we're learning, and we can help you sort of navigate the nuance between the enhancements in Teams Premium, as well as the availability and the utility of Copilot right within Teams. So a similar kind of example, but more driven by sort of that Outlook Copilot experience. So let's take a look at that.
Copilot in Outlook can help you prioritize your time and stay on top of meetings. Here you've been invited to a meeting that conflicts with the meeting you're planning to attend. Clearly, you can only attend one. From the meeting invite, you can choose to RSVP with follow. Switching over to your calendar, you can see that you're now following this meeting. Once the meeting starts on Teams, the organizer will receive a notification to record the meeting because someone is following it. Now, after the meeting is done and the recording is ready, Copilot will notify you that the meeting recap is ready for you to review. You can then ask Copilot some questions about the meeting, like, summarize this meeting, or are there any action items for me? That way you can stay on top of things as if you were present during the meeting.
So a little bit of different angle on a similar use case. You could see the calendar integration. You could see the calendar cues. You again can see the difference between the recap and the Copilot. One being sort of unique and you can guide it, one being more standardized and canned. The other thing, again, it's been a learning journey for us, is it talks about that note to the meeting to say, hey, record this thing. So far, the recording of the meeting seems to be mandatory, that there isn't currently an intermediary step that says, hey, record it for Copilot purposes, but let's not have a stream-based or SharePoint-based MP4 of the meeting itself, right? I could see long-term there being a notion that it's like, I want to record all the meetings to use with Copilot, but not necessarily have a bazillion media files laying around and sort of accessible after the fact, right? I could see that emerging, but right now that recording prompt is absolutely key. So let's take a look at Copilot in Word and see an example of what it can do for you.
When you've written a paragraph in shorthand, you can highlight it and click Rewrite. Copilot then offers several alternate options to choose from that are all written professionally, and it can translate wordy or complex paragraphs into digestible visualized tables. You can even use Copilot to add a column with extra data, which it can complete automatically. Copilot also makes you the expert on any document. Simply ask a question about the content, and Copilot will provide a concise response.
So pretty cool stuff. I really like that table creation piece, right? The ability to take, what might be wordy prose or sort of information dense prose and turn it into a table. A lot of us like to consume information that way. Sometimes it's vice versa, though. Sometimes I find myself maybe in a sales communication or something like that. I want it to feel more like a letter and more like a personal communication, than an Excel template of project due dates or something like that. So a lot of power to go both directions in Word, both making it more and more readable and more sort of prose friendly, and also making it more table friendly. Well, speaking of tables, let's take a look at an example in Excel.
Copilot puts all the rich capabilities of Excel at your fingertips. Say you need to analyze this quarter's sales results for the monthly business review. You start by asking Copilot to analyze the data and give you 3 key trends. Within seconds, you've got what you need, but you want to drill in. You ask Copilot a follow-up question about one of the trends. Copilot creates a new sheet, giving you a sandbox to play in, and helping you get a better understanding of what's happening without modifying the data in the original sheet. You ask Copilot to visualize what contributed to the decline in sales growth this period. Copilot adds a little color to make the prompt jump off the page. Now you want to dig a little deeper and ask a follow-up question with a what-if scenario. Copilot not only answers your question, it creates a simple model of the scenario, and even asks you if you want to learn more about what it did, with a step-by-step breakdown. Finally, you can ask it to create a graph of your projected model. Copilot has turned a sea of data into clear insights and actions.
What I really wanted it to ask Copilot is, how do I make reusable containers grow again next quarter? What strategies should I use? And that's really where this is all headed, right? It's, what, so what, now what, right? So we got the what and the so what. Now it's time for the now what with Copilot. And so we're experimenting with that, which is to say, what's the remediation, right? You've helped me identify a trend in my business or a challenge, based on the knowledge of our history, what campaigns we were running during business growth and what we were doing during, tough times, and help me think about what I could do differently next quarter around reusable containers. So I keep mentioning this notion of sort of learning by doing and learning by sharing, and Microsoft's addressed that with the Copilot Lab. So let's just take a quick look at what that can do for all the people in your environment.
Introducing Copilot Lab, a new experience that will help people build new work habits for a new AI-powered era of productivity. Copilot Lab is a place to experiment, to learn the art and science of prompting. You'll learn how to turn a good prompt into a great one. Share your favorite prompts with coworkers, and get inspired as we all learn to work in a whole new way together.
So unfortunately, instead of eating a bagel in Dan's office and watching him, try to Google query some Microsoft solution article 20 years ago, now you can do it from the comfort of your own desk. I suppose you can still have a bagel or talk to Dan on the phone. But the notion of, hey, everybody's going to learn by doing, and we have to facilitate the ability to share is absolutely critical. And it's so critical that it's built into the Copilot Foundation. And then if you want to take that even further, there's Copilot Studio. I've actually myself signed up for a free trial, and I'm working with the ability to connect to different data sources, create bots, create sort of proactive Copilot functionality within our environment based on our data. Right? The most common example that you'll see in demos is, the ability to point the Copilot Studio, let's say, at a website, whether it's internal or external, and create a bot that then you can deploy to the website that does, chat-based Q&A, right? Crawl my website, and based on everything you learn on my website, let's put up a chat window like we're all familiar with, and have that functionality almost immediately deployed to our public-facing website. Obviously, you want to test, want to pilot it. I'm working on that stage right now, getting it working. But I could see us deploying this to our website relatively soon. I mentioned security. One of the things about the Graph API and using Copilot for M365 within your walls is that it thinks about and ultimately respects the data security you have present. And so this is one of those considerations when I mapped out the getting ready for this internally, is thinking about your data structures and your security posture. So let's take a look at what that looks like with Copilot.
Microsoft 365 Copilot works with the data security controls you have in place for file access, labeling, classification, and data loss prevention. Mario Rogers works for Violet Martinez, and both are on the same team at Contoso. Mario and Violet are also members in the same group working on Project Falcon. Now we'll start with Violet, who's been working with the procurement and contract management teams to sell their partner ReliCloud 1,500 Mark 8 quadcopters. And you can see the file is labeled highly confidential with restricted access, and it describes all the terms in the purchase agreement. Because Violet has access to the file, she's able to search for and find it in SharePoint and Microsoft365.com. And of course, Violet can also navigate to the file's location in the agreements folder of the project site to find the purchase agreement. So now let's look at Mario's experience. Even though he's on the same team and working on Project Falcon with Violet, if Mario tries to search for the Contoso purchase agreement, he won't find it. And there are a few purchasing documents that he does find without sensitive information, but not the one that Violet's working on. And if Mario knows the location of the purchase agreement and tries to navigate to it directly, it just appears as an empty folder to him. And when Mario launches Word on the web and creates a blank document, then prompts Microsoft 365 Copilot to summarize the Contoso purchase agreement as a reference file, because Microsoft 365 Copilot respects the file permissions of its user, Copilot also cannot access the purchase agreement. Now, if we switch back to Violet's screen, because she has permission to access the purchase agreement, she can use Microsoft 365 Copilot to summarize the file. And after a moment, you'll see it created a summary of the purchase agreement, and Violet decides to keep it. Then data security controls for Microsoft Purview discover sensitive information found in the Microsoft 365 Copilot generated content. The document is automatically labeled as highly confidential, and policies are enforced to restrict access to the document.
So that last one is pretty wild, right? I think the run-up in this video is very familiar to all of us, whether you're old like me and you think about NTFS, or if you think about, Teams and SharePoint and search, respecting permissions. You can't only deny access, you have to deny visibility, right? Because if someone calls the file name, OMG, we're merging with our big competitor nextweek.com or .doc. Of course, that's going to tell a big story even without file access. And so Copilot respects all those same sort of imperatives when it comes to data security. But then this last piece where you used Copilot to generate a summary in a whole new document, it said, I created this summary from something labeled highly confidential. I'm going to carry that highly confidential label forward. That's pretty amazing stuff. And so, kind of in summary, it's got the security controls that you would expect. It respects all of those things that you have in place. And I think should allay any fears or concerns that Copilot creates an enhanced or an increased, difficulty securing your environment. If you've got those things in place, remember our 5 items for prep work. If you've got those things in place, Copilot will simply respect what you've put in place and carry it forward. If you're loosey-goosey with your data now, Copilot's going to be loosey-goosey with its answers and access, right? So there are some differences, obviously, with what you have as your underlying solution, whether it's O or M, E3, or whether it's E5. And this does a good job of sort of summarizing, hey, here's where you get sensitivity labels. Here's where you get, session-based risk assessment or automatic assignment of sensitivity labels. In my security talks I've been doing for years, that's one of the easiest ones to get people's brains around between the difference. One, you have to do the labeling yourself, but with E5, you can create rules that say, hey, if you see more than 10 social security numbers in a document, label it highly confidential and encrypted, right? And so Copilot plus those underlying platforms create sort of different security postures. And so Microsoft has really made clear their commitment to all these things. AI you can trust feels a little iRobot-ish. And so that always kind of sticks in my mind. That some of the language we're using now to describe these things were the things of science fiction 10 or 20 years ago. If Microsoft ever talks about the 3 laws, I'm out of here. But they've been very clear about their commitment and their understanding that they can't, for easiest example, they can't reach into, my tenant and your tenant to inform the model for somebody else's tenant, right? That can't happen. And so, Copilot is really designed, like I said, I've got some collateral I'm happy to share with people that sort of outlines how that query flow works and how your data stays inside the tenant. and informs the questions and the way the large language model is used across both, public and private. And so Microsoft's really sticking to these principles, and doing a good job of saying, here's how it's going to work in the business sphere. And so your call to action, that top one, I think, honestly, is probably the easiest one for anyone hearing my voice, is just set up a 30-minute Copilot briefing with us. Reach out, apexdigital.com/copilot-briefing, and you can book time at your leisure with me and my team to walk you through the basics, some of the more advanced. You want to create a purchase order to add some to your tenant. We can do all of those things in a very personalized way, just simply by reaching out. Also within this deck, I've got a number of links. I think what everybody has realized with Copilot is that there is a wealth of information to the point of being a little bit overwhelming. And that's why I've been working hard over the last month or two, training my team. Sean's been doing a great job of training and educating our delivery resources as well. And we're ready to go to help you navigate this journey. There's new things being learned every day. And we're really excited to help you go down this path and make sure it's additive to your business. So again, thinking back to the things about ROI and the things about being ready for this, don't just turn it on. Don't just, throw it out there to the masses. It's expensive at its price point if you're not getting the return on it. Partners like Apex can really help you with that. So Copilot-briefing off of our website, send an email to me, sthompson@apexdigital.com. We'll be happy to help you provide content, sign you up for a 30-minute briefing, and really looking forward to working with all of you as we go down this Copilot journey. So thanks for joining us, whether it's live or after the fact on Fridays with Steve, and I'll see you again next time.